You will hear a number of different recordings and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 parts. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Part 1. Part 1. You will hear a man talking to the coordinator of a photography club. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 4. Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Hello, Wayside Camera Club, Breeder speaking.
Oh, hello. My name's Dan, and I'd like to join your club.
That's great, Dan. We have an application form. Would you like to complete it over the phone? Then you can ask any questions you might have.
Oh, yes, thanks.
OK. So, what's your family name?
It's Green. Dan Green.
So, can I take your email address?
Yes, it's dan1068@market.com.
Thanks. And what about your home address?
Well, I'm about 10 miles away from your club in Peacetown. I live in a house there.
OK. So, what's the house number and street?
It's 52 Marrowfield Street.
Is that MARROWFIELD?
That's right.
And that's Peacetown, you said.
Uh-huh.
So, how did you hear about our club? Did you look on the internet?
I usually do that, but this time, well, I was talking to a relative the other day and he suggested it.
Oh, is he a member too?
He belongs to another club, but he'd heard good things about yours.
OK. So, what do you hope to get from joining?
Well, one thing that really interests me is the competitions that you have. I enjoy entering those.
Right. Anything else?
Well, I also like to socialise with other photographers.
That's great. So, what type of membership would you like?
What are the options?
It's £30 a year for full membership, or £20 a year if you're an associate.
I think I'll go for the full membership then.
That's a good idea, because you can't vote in meetings with an associate membership.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 5 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 5 to 10.
If I could just find out a bit more about you.
OK.
So, you said you wanted to compete. Have you ever won any photography competitions?
Not yet, but I have entered 3 in the past.
Oh, that's interesting. So, why don't you tell me something about those? Let's start with the first one.
Well, the theme was entitled Domestic Life.
I see. So it had to be something related to the home?
Yeah, I chose to take a photo of a family sitting round the dinner table having a meal. And, I didn't win, but I did get some feedback.
Oh, what did the judges say?
That it was too busy as a picture.
Aha. So it was the composition of the picture that they criticised?
That's right. And once they'd told me that, I could see my mistake.
So what was the theme of the second competition?
Well, my university was on the coast, and that area gets a lot of beautiful sunsets. So that was the theme.
Oh, sunsets. That's a great theme.
Yes, the instructions were to capture the clouds as well. It couldn't just be blue sky and a setting sun.
Sure, because they give you all those amazing pinks and purples.
Yeah, and I thought I'd done that well, but the feedback was that I should have waited a bit longer to get the shot.
I see. So the timing wasn't right.
Yes, I took it too soon, basically. And then the third competition I entered was called Animal Magic.
Well, that's a difficult subject.
I know. I had to take hundreds of shots.
I'm sure, because animals move all the time.
That's what we had to show. There had to be some movement in the scene. I got a great shot of a fox in the end, but I took it at night and, well, I suspected that it was a bit dark, which is what I was told.
Well, Dan, you seem to be really keen, and we'd be delighted to have you in our club. I'm sure we can help with all those areas that you've outlined.
Thanks, that's great.
That is the end of part 1. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to part 1. Part 2.
You will hear a talk given by a woman called Shona Ferguson about changes in a town called Barford. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
First of all, let me thank you all for coming to this public meeting to discuss the future of our town. Our first speaker is Shona Ferguson from Barford Town Council. Shona.
Thank you. First, I'll briefly give you some background information. Then I'll be asking you for your comments on developments in the town. Well, as you don't need me to tell you, Barford has changed a great deal in the last 50 years. These are some of the main changes. 50 years ago, buses linked virtually every part of the town and the neighbouring towns and villages. Most people used them frequently, but not now, because the bus companies concentrate on just the routes that attract most passengers. So parts of the town are no longer served by buses. Even replacing old, uncomfortable buses with smart new ones has had little impact on passenger numbers. It's sometimes said that bus fares are too high, but in relation to average incomes, fares are not much higher than they were 50 years ago. Changes in the road network are affecting the town. The centre was recently closed to traffic on a trial basis, making it much safer for pedestrians. The impact of this is being measured. The new cycle paths separating bikes from cars in most main roads are being used far more than was expected, reducing traffic and improving air quality. And although the council's attempts to have a bypass constructed have failed, we haven't given up hope of persuading the government to change its mind. Shopping in the town centre has changed over the years. Many of us can remember when the town was crowded with people going shopping. Numbers have been falling for several years, despite efforts to attract shoppers, for instance by opening new car parks. Some people combine shopping with visits to the town's restaurants and cafes. Most shops are small, independent stores, which is good, but many people prefer to use supermarkets and department stores in nearby large towns, as there are so few well-known chain stores here. Turning now to medical facilities. The town is served by family doctors in several medical practices, fewer than 50 years ago, but each catering for far more patients. Our hospital closed 15 years ago, which means journeys to other towns are unavoidable. On the other hand, there are more dentists than there used to be. Employment patterns have changed along with almost everything else. The number of schools and colleges has increased, making that the main employment sector. Services such as website design and accountancy have grown in importance, and surprisingly perhaps, manufacturing hasn't seen the decline that has affected it in other parts of the country.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
Now I'll very quickly outline current plans for some of the town's facilities, before asking for your comments. As you'll know if you regularly use the car park at the railway station, it's usually full. The railway company applied for permission to replace it with a multi-storey car park, but that was refused. Instead, the company has bought some adjoining land, and this will be used to increase the number of parking spaces. The Grand, the old cinema in the High Street, will close at the end of the year and reopen on a different site. You've probably seen the building under construction. The plan is to have 3 screens with fewer seats rather than just the one large auditorium in the old cinema. I expect many of you shop in the indoor market. It's become more and more shabby looking, and because of fears about safety, it was threatened with demolition. The good news is that it will close for 6 weeks to be made safe and redecorated, and the improved building will open in July. Lots of people use the library, including school and college students who go there to study. The council has managed to secure funding to keep the library open later into the evening, twice a week. We would like to enlarge the building in the not-too-distant future, but this is by no means definite. There's no limit on access to the nature reserve on the edge of town, and this will continue to be the case. What will change, though, is that the council will no longer be in charge of the area. Instead, it will become the responsibility of a national body that administers most nature reserves in the country. OK, now let me ask you if you have...
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Part 3.
You will hear two students called Jean and Thomas discussing their sports science course. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
Hi, Thomas. How are you enjoying the course so far?
Yeah, I think it's good.
Remind me, why did you decide to study sports science? Didn't you want to be a professional athlete when you were at school?
Yeah, that was my goal, and all my classmates assumed I would achieve it. They thought I was brilliant.
That must have been a nice feeling.
I thought I could win anything. There was no one who could run faster than me.
Exactly. So what happened? Did your mum and dad want you to be more academic?
Not at all. Perhaps they should have pushed me harder, though.
What do you mean?
I think I should have practiced more.
What makes you say that?
Well, I went out to Kenya for a couple of weeks to train.
Really? Oh, I didn't know that.
I was chosen to go there out of loads of kids and run with some of the top teenage athletes in the world. And I was so calm about it. I just kept thinking how fortunate I was. What a great chance this was. Everyone back home was so proud of me. But once we started competing, I very quickly realised I wasn't good enough.
That must have been a huge shock.
I thought, this can't be happening. I was used to winning.
I'm sorry to hear that.
It's okay. I'm over it now, and I think it's much better to do a university course. And this one has such a variety of sports-related areas. It's going to be good.
Oh, I agree. I chose it because of that.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
So, Jian, have you thought of any ideas for the discussion session next week on technology and sport?
We have to cover more than one sport, don't we?
Yeah.
You know, we always think technology is about the future, but we could gather some ideas about past developments in sport.
Look at early types of equipment, perhaps. I remember reading something about table tennis bats once, how they ended up being covered with pimpled rubber.
'Cause they were just wooden at first, I'd imagine.
Yeah. In about the 1920s, a factory was making rolls of the rubber in bulk for something like horse harnesses.
Really?
Yeah, and someone realised that it would make a perfect covering for the wooden bats.
So, what about cricket? That's had a few innovative changes. Maybe the pads they wear on their legs?
I don't think they've changed much, but I'm just looking on the internet. And it says that when the first cricket helmet came in 1978, the Australian batsman who first wore it was booed and jeered by people watching because it was so ugly.
Wow. Players have to protect themselves from getting hurt. I mean, everyone wears one now.
Unlike the cycle helmet.
Well, unless you're a professional. But you're right, many ordinary bikers don't wear a helmet.
Hey, look at these pictures of original helmet designs. This one looks like an upside-down bowl.
Yet the woman's laughing. She's so proud to be wearing it.
It says serious cyclists ended up with wet hair from all the hard exercise.
I guess that's why they have large air vents in them now, so that the skin can breathe more easily.
OK, so we've done helmets. What about golf balls? Or better still, golf clubs. They've changed a lot.
Yeah. I remember my great-grandfather telling me that because a club was made entirely of wood, it would easily break and players had to get another.
There's no wood at all in them now, is there?
No, they're much more powerful.
The same must be true of hockey sticks.
I don't think so, because players still use wooden sticks today. What it does say here, though, is that when the game started, you had to produce a stick yourself.
I guess they just weren't being manufactured. So, one more perhaps? What about football?
Well, I know the first balls were made of animal skin.
Yeah, they covered them with pieces of leather that were stitched together. But the balls let in water when it rained.
Oh, that would have made them much heavier.
That's right. You can imagine the damage to players' necks when the ball was headed.
Oh, how painful that must have been.
Yeah. Well, I think we can put together some useful ideas and...
That is the end of part 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers to part 3.
Part 4.
You will hear a lecturer giving a presentation about the Klondike Gold Rush. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Today, I'm going to talk about an incredible event in the history of Canada, the Klondike Gold Rush. Between 1896 and 1899, over 100,000 people set out to seek gold in the Klondike region, a remote area in northwestern Canada. Only 4,000 people were actually successful. Let's start by considering the journey people had to take in order to reach the Klondike River and start looking for gold. For most gold seekers, their journey began in Alaska, in a town on the coast called Skagway. From Skagway, one option was to take the White Pass Trail through the mountains. It probably looked easy enough at the beginning of the trail, but rocks made it difficult to make progress. On top of this, the men and their horses got stuck in the thick mud that covered long sections of the trail. The other option was the Chilkoot Trail. Now, although this trail was only about 35 miles long, it took about 3 months for the gold seekers to cover this distance. This is because the trail was incredibly steep, and people had to make the same trip multiple times in order to transport their equipment. Most people really had very little idea about how difficult the journey was going to be. So, although 100,000 may have set out on those two trails, only about 30,000 got to the end. So yes, the majority gave up. Often they were suffering from starvation or disease. They also came to the terrible realization that their journey was likely to end in failure, and so they turned around. Anyway, for those gold seekers who did continue, they eventually reached Lake Bennett. They might have expected that their journey was going to become easier at this point, but no. Because the lake was frozen over, many people had to wait until spring before they could continue their journey. In the meantime, a tent was the only protection they had from the cold. While they were waiting, people cut down trees and made boats. Once the ice melted, they could sail across the lake and start down the Yukon River. Again, this wasn't the end of their troubles. Once they reached a point of the river called Miles Canyon, things became very dangerous indeed. Many boats were destroyed in the rapids. In order to proceed down the Yukon River, the gold seekers needed to employ a real sailor, someone who could steer their boats and get through the canyon safely. From here on, the worst was over, and the gold seekers could sail to a place called Dawson at the mouth of the Klondike River. So earlier on I mentioned that gold seekers needed to make multiple trips up and down the two trails. This is because they had to transport an enormous amount of equipment. This equipment was set out on a very long list. It was actually the police who gave gold seekers the list, since they knew how unprepared many people were for the journey. People were obliged to take enough supplies to last them a year, so the list included clothing like boots and warm winter coats. There was also the food the gold seekers required. Perhaps items like tea weren't too hard to carry, but 400 pounds of flour would have been very heavy indeed. The gold seekers had to take a lot of tools as well, everything they needed for digging, for building, and so on. Things like rope were essential and could be packed away without too much difficulty. But imagine having to carry 2 or 3 buckets with you. All these things were compulsory. So, some people became very successful because of the gold rush, and not because they'd actually found gold themselves. Those who were business-minded saw many opportunities. They sold the supplies that the gold seekers needed. They established hotels and so on. And then there were people like Jack London. London was one of the gold seekers that actually survived the terrible journey, but he didn't find much gold. Still, he was inspired to write. Through his vivid description, his readers could share the feeling of adventure, even from the comfort of their armchair. Finally, it wasn't just men that tried to seek their fame and fortune. Many women also headed up the trails. Among them were Annie Hall Strong and Emma Kelly. In the U.S. and in other parts of Canada, ordinary citizens were keen to read about life in the Klondike. Working for different newspapers, Hall and Kelly often described their first-hand experience of danger and hardship. Another thing that needs to be discussed.
That is the end of part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to part 4. That is the end of the listening test.